I'm sorry, did she just say big oof mid-battle? Pokemon Legends ZA is finally here, and I don't think I've seen the Pokemon community this divided since the last Pokemon game came out. Anyways, usual fandom infighting aside, after how much I loved Pokemon Legends Arceus, I myself was very eager to get my hands on a copy of ZA. And now that I've played over 20 hours of this game, I'm ready to spill my thoughts about it out onto the internet that's currently completely at each other's throats over it. Because that can't possibly end badly, right? Pokemon Legends ZA brings back some long-missed mechanics, introduces fresh ideas, and also has its fair share of drawbacks. To start with the returning features, Mega Evolutions are back and there's even more of them now. I am loving all of the new Mega designs, and I have had a blast collecting the Mega Stones and using these awesome new evolutions in battle. From Fisher-Price's Mega Ring Stacker Meganium to biblically accurate Barbaracle, the return of Mega Evolutions is a very welcome one. Memes aside, I actually really do wish they had never gotten rid of Megas after Gen 6 and 7. I get the desire to give each generation their own gimmick lately, but it is my opinion that Dynamax, Gigantamax, and Terraforms are not anywhere near as good as Megas. I didn't mind them, but they don't really stack up against Mega Evolutions. I really hope Game Freak and the Pokemon Company are taking notes on how well the return of Megas is being received, so we can see them continue into future generations of Pokemon. Another part of ZA I would like to talk about is exploration. Of course, I think we can all agree this is a feature that has, with some exceptions, gotten progressively better over the years. I'm of the opinion that Sword and Shield's wild area and more free movement-based mechanics walked so that Scarlet and Violet as well as Legends Arceus could run. Personally, I do feel to some degree that ZA falls a bit short in terms of exploration, mostly because we don't ever get to leave Lumiose City. I would have loved to see more of Kalos, and after getting to experience Legends Arceus, which allowed us to travel all across Hisui, being limited to one city was a little lackluster. That said though, the city is huge. It doesn't feel as limiting as I had expected, so on that front, while I wish exploration was stronger, it's also not as bad as I feared it would be. I also had my concerns with wild zones feeling too small and limiting, and while they are admittedly pretty small for the most part, they also aren't as small as I expected, and because you unlock more of them as you progress through the game, I think that there is a good sense of balance there, especially for the story that this game is telling. Matter of fact, at times when I was trying to focus on getting to main quest and side quest areas, not on trying to catch Pokemon, I found myself a little annoyed with wild zones obstructing my path to those spaces. While this was mildly frustrating, I also can't help but feel that it supported the narrative of the game and helped drive the differing opinions held by characters in the game about the implementation of wild zones inside Lumiose. While my initial thought once I started facing this issue was, well, that's inconvenient, I found myself realizing, oh, if this is bothersome for me as the player, imagine being someone who actually had to live in a city like this, especially if you aren't a Pokemon trainer. There are entire blocks of the city you just straight up couldn't go to if you weren't someone capable of handling Pokemon battles, and I can imagine that would be very frustrating. I definitely don't think exploration and the wild zones are perfect. I do think this is one of the elements that Legends Arceus did measurably better on, but for the limited environment of the game, I think that they work, and I wasn't nearly as disappointed with them as I was worried I might be. I do definitely wish we could explore more of Kalos, though. Now, speaking of my comparisons to Legends Arceus, another area where these two share significant overlap is in the prolific amount of side quests. The main stories for both are only about 25 hours, give or take, which is a fair amount of content for a shorter JRPG, but much like Legends Arceus, ZA has over 100 side quests. While that may sound excessive, I found the variation in quest types as well as the pacing of when the quests are given to be rather comfortable, and I had a good time working on those as a means to help with level grinding my Pokemon and filling my Pokedex. In that regard, I find both Legends games to be on relatively even footing with each other, perhaps even leaning a bit in ZA's favor. I feel like with Legends Arceus, it was rather easy for me to just grind through each set of side quests as they were given sometimes, not really having to give much effort to many of them, but in ZA there are some side quests I unlocked in my first couple play sessions that I'm still working on. While the quantity is comparable, for some reason, I find it easier to pad out my playtimes with the side quests than I did in Legends Arceus. It comes with a minor trade-off, as with Legends Arceus, I feel like the main quests involved a bit more of the exploration aspects of the game, and required you to do more traveling along the way, especially with the vastly more limited number of fast travel locations. Whereas many of the main quest objectives in ZA are easier to fast travel to, and able to be handled relatively quickly in one location. But because of the way side quests pushed me to have to do more around the map, I felt like it was a relatively even trade and wasn't really bothered by it. Another thing I wanted to touch on in regards to returning features is the character customization. With Gen 6 having the most character customization and outfits in the history of the Pokemon games, it probably comes as no surprise that not only did ZA bring back this impressive level of customization, but there are also so many more options than the X and Y predecessors, and I think the clothing options are possibly one of my favorite things in this game. I've lost track of how much money I've spent on clothes in this game, and while it's such an inconsequential part of the game, I know a lot of the fandom is having as much fun as me building their wardrobe and putting together outfits. I am so relieved to be able to put this much customization into my character again. While Legends Arceus did offer a fun variety of options, there weren't quite as many pieces to work with, and I do think we can all agree that Scarlet and Violet left us feeling pretty neglected on that front. ZA feels like a proper return to form for character customization in the franchise, and this is another area that I deeply hope Game Freak is listening to us on. I never want to be limited to 4 clothing options ever again in the Pokemon franchise. Alongside the character customization, before we move on, I did also want to mention that while I don't think ZA has the best character design in the franchise, the designs are pretty solid, and honestly, I really love how Gen Z coded some of the dialogue is among the younger characters. While some people may find these characters to be cheesy or have that "how do you do, fellow kids" vibe, I really enjoyed the dialogue and honestly thought that this was more of an authentic representation of how I and a lot of other Gen Z folks interact with each other than a lot of the media that tries to write characters with that kind of dialogue. Now, moving on to what's new in Legends ZA. First up is the real-time battle system. I had some pretty big concerns about the move from turn-based combat to real-time combat, because personally, I don't have the best track record for real-time combat, and as such I feel like I'm in the unpopular group of people who actually prefers turn-based systems in games. That said, I am not bothered by Pokemon's move to real-time combat at all. I didn't have nearly as much of a learning curve for this system as I expected, and frankly, I found it to be really fun. From the very first battle, I found that the amount of time I spent worrying about how I would adjust to this new style of Pokemon battles was mostly for nothing. I have had absolutely no issues adjusting to real-time battles, and I really love the freedom of movement, varied range, and the overall look of battles in this style. We also have the introduction of the ZA Royale and Battle Zones. The ZA Royale is both a main game feature and online feature where you battle other trainers to earn points and climb through the ranks striving for A rank, which is reserved for only the strongest trainers in the city. In the online version, you'll compete against other players in seasons, not unlike previous versions of online competitive Pokemon, while in the main game, you'll compete against NPCs and use your progression in the system as part of the main storyline. Battle zones are zones around the city that are randomly designated each night as areas where trainers can battle each other to earn points in the ZA Royale. After reaching the designated number of points, you'll receive a challenger's ticket, which allows you to challenge the designated character for a rank-up match. Whoever wins the match will move on to the next rank and face tougher opponents. Now, I'm personally really fond of the ZA Royale and Battle Zones, and really enjoyed scouring each night for new opponents to face off against in the story mode. However, a quick spoiler warning for anybody who doesn't want part of the story progression spoiled for them. Go ahead and fast forward to the time marked on screen or in the description if you don't want to hear this part. Are y'all gone? Okay. I don't like how quickly the game jumps the player ranks in the name of story progression. Being ripped immediately from the lower ranks all the way up to like rank G was honestly kind of annoying, as I personally was looking forward to grinding out the ranks. Sure, I could see not making players do a full 26 ranks worth of grinding, I get that, but I didn't like skipping so many ranks. Alright, spoilers over. For those of you who skipped that section, welcome back. For the spoiler-free version of my rant, the TLDR is that I feel like pacing for the story mode version of the ZA Royale feels off, and I wish that it was paced a little better throughout the story. All of that said though, I do think the ZA Royale was a good concept, and I was pleased to see it carried over to online matches as well. As someone who hasn't felt very incentivized or interested in online PvP in Pokemon previously, it is a really fun way to play with other players. I just wish the story mode version of it was better. Now, moving on from the new features to the less than amazing things about this game, let's address the criticisms. Up first, the big one people have been talking about, textures. Buildings are flat faces with textures just slapped onto them in place of modeling the details like balconies and windows. Admittedly, I didn't notice this until people pointed it out, but I also can't unsee it now that it has been pointed out. Now, I will say this isn't the first game we've seen do this, even in modern times. I'm sure that some of you will recall the models for the animals in Animal Crossing New Horizons use this for features like Sasha's bangs, and I believe the paw pads and other 3D looking but ultimately not actually 3D features. That said though, I believe because it's mostly used on a smaller scale in New Horizons, save for things like wallpapers, it was ultimately easier to deal with and didn't look as drastic, as to where this method is used all over the map on large-scale objects in Legends ZA, making it more noticeable. I do think it would have been nice to see more attention to detail in the 3D rendering for ZAs, so while it's not anything that ruins the gameplay, it is also bothersome that it feels like Game Freak is so frequently cutting corners on graphics in these games. Now, credit where it's due, I will say that playing the Switch 2 version definitely gives the graphics a leg up, and the game looks far better on that system. But I do think this is one of those times where the Switch 1 especially will be starting to show its age in terms of graphics capabilities. That said, this is where I'm going to interject with a little silver lining for everyone. Did you know that the Switch 2 cartridge for Legends ZA will work on your Switch 1? The only difference is that it won't also run the upgrade pack for the graphics, so while your experience will look a little less polished, if you're planning to eventually grab yourself a Switch 2 but have the itch to play ZA before that happens, feel free to get a copy of the Switch 2 version instead for when you do eventually get the console. I was really pleasantly surprised that this actually worked, as I personally thought this was a prank akin to telling people to delete System 32. Anyways, back to the criticisms. The second thing that I was personally annoyed by is the overall price tag to be able to get everything the game has to offer, as well as the decision to announce DLC before release. I already don't love that the base game costs $70, although I'm not going to be one of those people who pretends that that is a problem at all unique to Nintendo, or new to the Switch 2 in the slightest. But it also feels like a questionable move to announce DLC before the base game is even out, and when you're functionally asking players to spend $70 on the game, $30 on the DLC, and then even more money for the Nintendo Switch Online membership just to be able to get the Kalos starter Mega Evolutions, it all starts to add up a bit fast for a game that we, by the time all of this was announced, weren't even sure would actually be good enough to justify DLC. The Nintendo Switch Online membership is its own thing, and I won't get into that here because again, it's not a problem at all unique to Nintendo, but it is a bit infuriating that we're being asked to dump over $100 into this one game if we want to experience all of the content, you know? I think the last of the criticisms I would like to discuss, perhaps the one that bothered me the most while actually playing the game, and certainly something that isn't unique to this entry in the series, is the lack of voice acting. My personal opinion is that I think modern Pokemon games would stand to benefit a lot from voice acting, and it's not like the argument of, well, the protagonist doesn't talk because they're a self-insert, so we can't do voice acting, holds any weight, considering we have games like Breath of the Wild, Skyrim, and even Story of Seasons, where the protagonist doesn't talk much, if at all, and other characters are all voiced. Going straight from Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar, where all of the story cutscenes are voiced, to the silence of Pokemon Legends ZA felt jarring. I honestly don't think I've ever been as bothered by the lack of voice acting in Pokemon as I was when making that jump between games. I had a conversation with one of my friends probably about 2 years ago now where we discussed how Scarlet and Violet would have benefited a lot with voice acting, but for some reason I felt that even more playing ZA. So where does that leave us? Pokemon Legends ZA, to me, is definitely a step forward in some areas. ZA Royale, real-time battles, and the return of and expansion on Megas are all fantastic. But, at the same time, I cannot help but feel the way we're seeing corners cut while still slapping an ever-increasing price tag either on the case or in the fine print is a step back. None of my criticisms make the game unenjoyable. On the contrary, I've been having a wonderful time with this game, much in the way that I did with Scarlet and Violet despite its flaws. And honestly, I didn't want to discuss the story too much in this video because I don't want the game spoiled for people who want to play it but haven't had the chance. But the writing for the story, honestly, makes up for my issues with this game. Yes, I wish such an amazing story had voice acting. Yes, I wish such an amazing story had slightly better graphics. But it is some fantastic writing, and I'm not going to let some minor quirks overshadow that. Anyways, I think that about wraps up my thoughts for today. If you watched the video this far, tell me your favorite Pokemon down in the comments below. And if you've played Legends ZA, feel free to drop your thoughts on the game as well. I would love to hear them. Until next time, stay cozy.